it is low-level playing with tarot cards and stuff like that, things that seem very, very harmless. And I think the church need to educate children from a young age to stay away from these things, because it opens doors into areas they shouldn't go.
That's interesting, isn't it, Laura? At that point, you had none of this. In other words, for you, it was okay. You had no warnings about it. Well, one Catholic friend, and you weren't sure about the basis for that, so you could dismiss it. Until you started getting involved and everything seemed to be okay. As you moved on, did you begin to have any frightening experiences but still carried on with it? I mean, what happened as that developed?
Yes, I think sometimes there was even a slight fear at the back of your mind, so to speak, but you still went along before anything really frightening happened. There was still a little bit of apprehension. And then you would hear rumours of, through the spiritualist churches, you would hear that sometimes an obnoxious or mischievous spirit may manage to come through, and you knew that that was a risk and a possibility, but you just carried on anyway, because most of the time you would be safe, and most of the time your spirit guides would protect you, so you would just go along with it all anyway.
And did you, I mean, with that coming through, did you actually realise that these spirits were in control of you rather than you in control of these spirits? I mean, because that very fact that mischievous spirits, as they were called, could come through, surely that meant that you couldn't control things, and these things were greater than you. Did that ever cause concern either for you or others around you?
Well, it seems a bit strange, but I never really thought about it that way at the time, although I certainly see it that way now. It was just quite strange how you could be so trusting of any spirit guides and the whole spirit realm when you don't really know who could come through. So we were, I suppose, a bit naive to presume that everything will be safe. And I think there were certain explanations given, like, well, if you have negative energies, you may attract a negative spirit, or if you're a very vulnerable person, you may suffer depression or mental illness by talking to spirits. That was an explanation given, but that would make me think, well, that shows you there's something dangerous in it then, if you've got to make sure you're not negative or fearful, or it's not as safe as what we would originally think.
But because it was exciting, because it was meeting a need, you just carried on regardless, even with those doubts and question marks in your mind. And
you carried on regardless because, again, I suppose you felt, well, my mother and I were members of one spiritualist church, but also another two churches that we regularly went to. So we had a lot of contacts of other spiritualists, other mediums, and I guess we felt if anything does go wrong, we've got all those people who are very experienced and will be able to help us. Therefore, it's not really a risk, and the benefits would seem to outweigh the disadvantages, like always having advice whenever you wanted, basically, from your spirit guides or from mediums, very accurate advice and everything like that. So it did seem a huge plus, actually.
So for you, most of the time, it was the spirit guides that were talking to you then and giving you messages, not necessarily dead people as such.
Well, a mixture of both, really. I was still developing in the psychic area. My mother was clairaudient, clairvoyant, clairsentient. She could literally hear spirits anytime. She didn't have to go to the spiritualist church to get a message from the medium. She could hear spirits in the house, whether they were spirit guides or so-called dead relatives. I was still developing in that area.
Right.
Yeah.
And this didn't worry you at all? I mean, other than you say the doubts that you had, you could live in the house, you could be in the house, and these spirits could turn up and things like that could happen, and that not worried you at all?
No, in fact, it was actually very comforting because, I firmly believed that my dead grandmother was there and my dead sister was there, and it was something very comforting about that, to think they were always with you and always on the lookout for you. And so no, it wasn't really frightening. It was a comfort, really.
Michael, when you deal with a lot of people
Yes.
that have been involved in various things, and I mean, when you start talking to people and they have that experience that Laura has, that, well, it's all right, there's nothing wrong with it. Where do you take them? What do you begin to do to try and help them?
Well, what I would do is let them know the danger that they're in, and know the spirit guides, or as we would call it in the church, familiar spirits, as experienced in 1 Samuel 28, verses 5 to 16, if I might quote that.
Yeah,
if anyone
please do.
wants to read that, the Witch of Endor.
Yeah.
The story of the tormented Saul who goes there to try and conjure up the body of Samuel, the prophet. So I would always say to people, and like you say, people are drawn into this because the information they get is very accurate. And if it's very accurate, people think it's believable. Now, if you have a look at the whole area of mediums and spiritualists, when you've lost someone you love very, very greatly, and you may be suffering trauma, you may have bereavement, to hear that they're okay, that they're safe on the other side, they're happy, they're with their friends and other members of their family, is very comforting. And you see, the deception is that the devil wants you to be comforted so he can take you into the next level of this sort of thing. He's not going to say, for argument's sake, your granddad's being tormented. Oh, your granddad's safe. This is he's gone to the path of the light and all this sort of stuff they talk about. And that's to draw you into the next level of it. And the next level is opening up the occult and various occult skills to you to draw you in. My mother, who was a Romany gypsy, operated in these skills, as you would call it yourself. I mean, she could say what record was coming on the radio next. When the records was playing, she could say, oh, the next record's the Beatles, She Loves You, and it would come on. So there's something there, whether it comes down the ancestral bloodline or whether it's there. But these skills are attractive to people. And you see, we're not asking for repentance. We're not asking for people to acknowledge their wrongs or their sins. We're just asking them to move in those gifts if they get involved in it. I'm not talking about the stuff at fairgrounds and, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not talking
Cross
about
my
that.
palm with silver.
No, I'm talking about real deceptive occult practices.
Yeah. As you can see, the text and the email are up on the screen. Come through to us if you've got questions on this area as we develop this. First of all, this whole area of Laura's involvement with spiritualism and deliverance from it. And then as we talk further about Halloween, do come on to us. The text is 07781 472647, 07781 472647, and the email is live@talkgod.com. So do come through. They come up on the screen in front of me, and we'll bring your questions, your comments in as we develop, and they become relevant to the conversation that we're having. So do come through and make contact with us, and later on we will have the phone lines open. I just hesitate because I just realised what I said. Do come through and make contact with us. And I was talking about you, the living. Okay, we weren't talking about. It's just the way my mind works. It's all right, guys. Laura, in spiritualism, and you were getting involved with it, and you were happy with it. Of course, your mother was involved with it, so that obviously helped as well. Did you have any thinking concerning future life, of what it would be after death? Would everything be all right? Did you have any consideration for eternal things while you were there in spiritualism?
Really, within spiritualism, we really did take on board all of the New Age teaching and philosophies, and Eastern teachings as well. So we firmly believed in reincarnation and karma. So we weren't worried about death at all. We believed we would go into other realms and progress through the realms. We certainly didn't believe in heaven or hell or punishment for sin or needing forgiveness or anything like that. You just worked through the karmas, and even if you had been a mass murderer, you wouldn't go to hell. You would just go to a low-level plane and reincarnate and come back until you could work up the planes. And so we certainly didn't fear death, no.
That's interesting.